another extra episode of Arinda Talks. For the next 2-3 weeks, I will make each week an extra episode with the recap of the first season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Spoiler alert! If you don't want to know what is in the episode or about Strange New World, please listen to this episode after you've watched the episode. I will post this episode on Wednesday, just before the next episode will appear on the streaming services. This to avoid spoilers. During the USS Enterprise routine survey of the Dionysian Nebula, Dr. M'Benga employs his free time to continue his research into finding a cure for his daughter Rikia. Despite her deterioration condition, Rikia wishes to hear her father read the ending of The Kingdom of Elysian, a fairy tale penned by Benny Russell. But like any creative mind, she expresses dissatisfaction with the story ending. Before putting Rikia back into the transporter buffer, an emotional M'Benga promised her that she can construct her own stories when she is older. M'Benga channeled his resolve into concocting new formulas, one of which practically blows up in his face. Number 1 arrives to gently remind him of his duties as Chief Medical Officer, but also orders the doctor to get some rest. With the survey mission completed, the bridge crew attempts to set a course for a starbase. However, the Enterprise is inexplicably stuck in a nebula. Lieutenant Ortegas is injured during the rough ride. Captain Pike calls for M'Benga, who arrives to find the bridge adorned with medieval tapestries and the crew wearing regal attire. M'Benga himself is dressed as King Ridley, the monarch from the story he read to Rikia. Only M'Benga recall his true identity, as Pike and Ortegas believe themselves to be the Elysian Kingdom's Sir Raud and Sir Ida, respectively. While the trappings indicate in ancient settings, the Enterprise computer, life support, and other vital systems are still functional. The vessel hulls are covered with foliage to represent the Elysian forest, but the trappings are merely ornamental. M'Benga heads to sickbay for a tricorder, encountering Nurse Chapel in the guise of a healer. The doctor finds no abnormalities in his own scan, though Chapel has elevated dopamine levels. This is one of the funniest and loveliest episode, I think, in the whole Star Trek franchise. Of course, we have episodes like Short Leave of TOS and Voyager's episode The Plotter with Aunt Naomi Wildman. Well, it was really fun to watch as well, but this was I really enjoyed this episode. Not only for the whole aspect of being in a fairy tale or medieval times, but the characters they play. And I really believe that the actors have really fun doing this episode. So that is well done written as well. My applaud to the writers. This time we start with the medical log of Dr. M'Benga. And I must say, it is so nice to see that M'Benga has a stronger role and is being a stronger appearance than he normally is. I really love his whole storyline for this episode. So, like I said in the intro, he still is looking for that one cure for his daughter. And as a parent, I think it's very difficult, and especially if you're a parent and a doctor, you want to help your loved one as much as you can. And we see that in Mbanga and his daughter. And although we don't know really what illness the child has, we can imagine what it is like for Mbanga to watch his child getting sicker and sicker and he can't help her. For me, as a alternative healer, it was very nice to see that they make his medical lab, a little bit how, I don't want to say how I would have it, but more like the herbs, the liquids, all the things you need to find a formula for that illness. So what happens is that the experiment blows up in his face, and that would have attracted the alien entity in the nebula, and from that start everything went wrong, and maybe it went wrong in a good way. And when they closed in on the uniform of Mbanga, my first thought was, I think they redid it, and they made I don't want to say upgrade of the uniform, but more like it's more detailed. And that's what I noticed later on in the episode as well. They have done redo the other uniforms as well, because when Una came talk to Mbanga, and I have the feeling now that Una and Mbanga have some kind of a closer bond than there is, and I don't know, we never have seen those close bondness of Una in the way of who she as a character is, because and that's what it's a little bit a pity when we look at TOS. They're just certain characters that have those backstories, and we see the bond between them. For, of course, example like Bones, Spock, and Kirk. So it is nice to see that the writers, and I really must say this, guys, the writers have done a really good job with the writing of this series. I really, really like it. I think they did the uniforms as well. It's more detailed, more, I think, of a better quality as well. Pike wants to go to the nearest starbase, but the Enterprise has been captured in that nebula, and there was a shock to the whole Enterprise, like that they got bumped into, and Ortegas was hurt, and Pike called for Dr. Mbanga. And when Dr. Mbanga stepped into the bridge, it was a complete different world. Beautiful fantasy world. And Mbanga was the king. And he was one of the characters from the book he was telling his daughter about. And we see that his daughter is playing a big role in this episode, which I really like. I think, and I'm not for sure, but the woman who played his older daughter at the end of the episode, I think she's familiar, but I can't recall where I know her from. I really love the characters that they're playing, and We know, for example, Pike like a strong man, a driven man, a passionate man, and now he played a coward. And that was really fun. It was really nice to see how they got dressed. And, it's really fun to see. And I think you could see the actors' performance, how fun they had. And, it's really super to see that all those costumes as well. It's really beautiful, and it's very, in one way, it's very weird to see how a fantasy medieval time is on the Enterprise, and you see that you could see that it's still the Enterprise, but it's overgrown with green and forest and whatever else more. So in one way it's very funny to see. So how more the story developed, how more the ship is changing in this Elysian landscape. Mamenga went to the sick bay to scan himself and what is going on. Is he going to be crazy? And he finds Nurse Chapel there as like a healer or a herb lady, which I really love because I'm one myself. And it was really nice to see how they put that whole thing together. And Mamenga was scanning himself and he was scanning Nurse Chapel, and so he found out what's going wrong. And then Princess Talia came in, and oh my god, she is the opposite of La'an. And I have just said before, guys, I don't really like La'an, but if you know her story development, then I can understand where she's coming from. But her playing a spoiled princess was really funny to watch, and she was so theatrical, and oh my god, when she started to sing like classical, I was thinking, OMG, I didn't know you had that in you. And it was super, 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 super funny. I really loved it. And that they choose a King Charles Spaniel or Cocker Spaniel as her companion. That was really funny too. Because normally we have more like strong pet animals in Star Trek. And, well, that little doggy was just like, so cute and so innocent and vulnerable. And, well, it was just really funny to see how Princess Talia was putting there. And the dress, I think she really must love that dress. I saw a little video on, I think, YouTube or Twitter, that she was showing the dress and how floaty it was, and it was a really beautiful dress. So we have Pike as the king's chamber man in a way, and lord. And we have Ortegas, also a knight, but also the bodyguard of the king. And I really liked that part for her, because it was like Ortegas. And it was Ortegas, how she is. And it's just really funny that Pike and Ortegas were nemesis now. So that was really fun to see. And the only weird thing in this episode was, and maybe I need to watch it for a couple of more times, was that Helmer was also the only one who has his known his own identity. But when he emerged with the entity from the nebula, so the entity could talk through Hammer, Hammer has no recollection of the whole thing what happened. And before that, he had, because he was like the brother of Pollux, the Dark Wizard, who was played by Spock, with long hair. And although it looks very good on Ethan Peck, I really had to laugh. It's that known tropes of the fantasy world, the Dark Wizard. If you see Dark Wizards in fantasy stories or in movies, like Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or name it, those wizards have a similar look. And I must say, I really did like Ethan Peck's look as the Dark Wizard. And so Hammer played the good and white version of the wizard, but instead of being the real wizard with magic, he used science as magic. And that was very interesting to see. But also how Conscience, M'Benga, and Hammer worked together to get this around. And so we also meet Queen Eve. And Queen Eve is played by Uhura with a beautiful white dress. Also, and that is the... I don't want to say stupid, but I don't recall a word for it in English now. But it was very... She wore white. And you wouldn't expect that from a dark queen. So it does remind me of a few of the evil queens that we know from fantasy books or fantasy stories or movies. But I did like her outfit. It was really, really nice to see. And also that how she acted like the evil queen. It's like she was very, evil. So the Mercury Stone is very important in the story, and M'Benga's daughter is the Mercury Stone of this whole episode, and she was also his Mercury Stone. And we see in the end of the story is that M'Benga has to learn to let her go so she could have the best life she could have. And that's very... and that's what I really like of the series too. Some of the episodes have really great and good themes to talk about. And it reminds me really of TOS. I really love this series about that. It's really nice to see also that, how they write this whole series. I'm really enjoying it. And for the people over the world who doesn't have access to watch Strange New Worlds already, you really need to watch this. It's really recommendable, and you're really going to love it. If you're just a Star Trek fan in general, you're really going to enjoy this. It's very nice. The whole episode's at its own, it's so nice, and I must say, I didn't expect an episode like this one. But it makes almost, it's expands the world of Star Trek. And it's like also, one of the themes of this episode is like, honor your inner child. It doesn't matter how old you are, because your inner child or your childlike being, you need that to be not too serious, and you need that to dream, to move forward, to have hope, to conquer love, to conquer evil, etc. And I think that is very important to remind yourself of this. They are in the dungeons now, and Hammer and Mbenga are talking to each other, and they found out what was really going on, but they couldn't get out the dungeon. So this was like, I thought it was somewhere in the cargo bay, if I'm correct. But Hammer had this little device that he could use to break or melt down the door. And he was, I must say, this is the first time we see Hammer really having this most emotion, like being as he is. And it was very fun to watch how he was this science wizard to play like a character that was, because normally we don't see him. I don't want to say that he is acting like Vulcans, but it's more like, okay, it's just Hammer. It's it's his way, and he demands respect. And in this episode, he was like actually fun, and it was very beautiful to see how he helped the entity to communicate with Mbenga. So they tried to get to engineering, and I believe, they used the Jeffries tubes. That is very nice to see as well. They went to engineering to get control over the ships again. So like life support and other systems. And when they are walking to the engineering, they encountered the Queen and the Queen's Guard. And Ortega was the one who fought them. And of course, cowardly Pike runs away. But Ortega fights them. And in the end of this scene, she got help from Una the Huntress. And I really love that character. Not only how they only the clothes of her, but she reminds me really of, not as sure as Robin Hood, but more like, a huntress in a fantasy story that used to work and love the woods. And she mentioned that a couple of times, that the forest is calling her. She has to go back. And it's very nice to see how Ortega and Una were like friends like that, and maybe a little bit more. So they went to engineering, and they found out that there were hints that the entity in the nebula, and it's a whole new world that how to communicate with the entity. So they also find out that the little daughter of Mbenga is changing the story. And in one way, that is very nice to see, because as a happy little girl who loves fantasy stories and making her own stories, you want to have a happy ending. I think everyone likes a happy ending. unless you love thrillers, horror, and that kind of thing. What we see then is that Pollux is eavesdropping and telling the evil Queen Eve, what's happening, and she is very destructive in telling him, okay, stop them, because otherwise you'll get paid for it. I'm not in a mood of being nice. So Queen Eve has the plans to kidnap Mbenga's daughters, and the next scene is that Mbenga find out where his daughter is, and that was in his chamber. And the last time he talked with her, he told her, yeah, if you are healthy, you can come into my chamber or my quarters. And again, they encounter Queen Eve, and Pollux and Queen Eve are daring Hammer to use magic. So Hammer got out this communicator, and he uses that magic word, abracadabra. And I really was thinking, oh shoot, that is so lame. But he used the communicator to transport Queen Eve and her soldiers to Cargo Bay 12 or Cargo Bay 2, where they are captured. That was, in one way, very funny to see as well. So Mbenga is in his quarters now, and his daughter is there. And his daughter is completely healthy. And they talk. And because he is talking to his daughter and talking also about the story with, you're the Mercury Stone, he reminds himself, okay, this is going to be different than I wanted to. I have seen her healthy now, and now she has to go back to the buffer so I can help her. And she's told Mbenga about the entity, and Mbenga was very struck with it and said, yeah, how can I communicate with her, because I don't sense anything. And it was that point that Hammer stepped up and said, well, she can use me, but be gentle with me, because it's very, very hard for me to do this. It's going to be hellish to let this happen. So the entity used Hammer to talk with Mbenga, and she told him, you need to let her go. I can give her so much than you are giving her now, and her body will never heal. So the body is a destructive way to keeping her alive. And I really, really love this scene of the whole Mbenga and his daughter, and saying goodbye to his daughter and everything. When the entity took his daughter away, she said, oh daddy, it's tickling. And then she vanished in a light. But seconds later she comes back. And now she's grown up. And she thanked her dad that he let her go, and that he not only she's thankful that she could have a great life now with stories that she wrote and adventures and not being alone anymore, etc. And that was one of the things when that episode aired with when Pike had that encounter with Larissa again, and that little boy was a child sacrifice. It reminds me of that as well, and how children are very important, not only in daily life, is how we know now, but I mean also in the future. And I think those children, and we could see that, for example, with Naomi Wildman and Wesley Crusher and some other kids in Star Trek, they really playing a very important and great and good role to the franchise, but also for the crew. So it was very nice to see that this little girl, although she was ill and we not really getting to know her, she was a really great asset for Star Trek. And you know, if you look back to the children from through all the Star Trek franchises, I think not knowing what the future is bringing, children will always be part of this future. They are the hope of the future. They are the future, as the saying goes. Mbenga becomes very emotional when he learns that his daughter called the entity of her mother. And that was very nice. I really loved that scene. And after that, the entity went away with her and the nebula was gone. And that was the moment that Hammer couldn't remember everything or anything what had happened. And the only thing he said was, Doctor, am I in your private quarters? And oh damn, I'm having the biggest headache ever. I can't, I need to go to the sickbay for it. And a moment later, we see that the whole crew hasn't have memories of it. And when Una came check on Mbenga, she noticed the change in him. And also because she knows that Mbenga had his daughter in the transporter buffer, she has the sense that there was something happened and that he knew what happened in the 5 hours before, and that were exactly the 5 hours that the crew didn't remember anything. So she asked Mbenga to tell the story. And it was really nice to see that, like I said before, it was really nice to see that this crew has a very, very strong bond with each other. And it's what they always say. A Star Trek ship would be a they have families on board, but Starfleet is a second family. So we are at the end of this episode, and there's only one thing I still need to do, and that is rating this episode. I really enjoyed this episode, so I will give it a very good 9.5. And maybe you ask yourself, well, not 10. If it would be a 10, for me, I would like to have a two-parter of this episode. I really loved it and enjoy it. So, dear listeners, thank you for listening, and join me next week for a new extra episode of Orinda Talks in the Star Trek series. You can listen and subscribe to Orinda Talks on the YouTube channel or join the Facebook group. If you like to comment or talk with me about this episode, you can reach out on the Facebook group and of course the YouTube channel. I also like to tell you about my other podcast called Girls Talking Trek. Together with my co-host Amanda, we recap every 2 weeks a Star Trek episode starting with Star Trek TNG. All the episodes will be recapped and chronically following. We'll approach each episode with humor and a feminine look. Ghost Talking Track is to listen, follow and subscribe on Anchor, Google Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, the Facebook group and the YouTube channel. See you next week!